Miami was expected to make. I don't think Miami doesn't make it unless some catastrophic thing happens. I was very surprised Alabama got it. The only way I thought Alabama was getting in is if they knocked off Georgia or made the game so very close that it really went down to the wire and challenged Georgia all the way to the end. They got their butts whipped 28-7 by Georgia. They shouldn't have been on the same field as the Georgia Bulldogs. They really shouldn't have. And that was the surprising thing that happened on Saturday when I was DJing at that runway show, is watching Alabama get their butts whipped on national television. But the fact that Notre Dame, Love is one of the best, more prolific, top talented offensive players we've seen all season long, the running back who everybody expects to be a top-end player, one of the better offensive players coming out of this class, to not see him play for maybe a national championship this year or even fight for a national championship. And we're talking about him up for a Heisman Trophy. To not see this guy, this kid, to me, it's just absolutely appalling. Now, if you remember Boise State last year, and they had Genty and Boise State, I think they made it to the Final 12.
Yeah, they were the number 3 seed.
Yeah, they got knocked out pretty quick in the tournament. I don't know if Notre Dame would have, wherever they would have matched against, whoever they put them against, and I don't know how they would have been seeded. But whoever they matched against, I don't know, unless they were matching against James Madison or one of these guys, which they probably wouldn't have. They would have been against one of these more ranked teams like Texas A&M or whoever. They probably lose. But I would probably rather watched Love and Notre Dame play, especially how well they've played all season long. What did they lose one game this year?
They lost twice for a combined 4 points.
Okay, so they lost twice this year. And I would have rather seen them than James Madison or Tulane. And I'm not taking shots at Tulane. Tulane's had a sensational year. They won their championship. So I'm not gonna say that Tulane doesn't deserve to be there. The coach is going to coach Florida next year, one of the better SEC teams in the country. So, and he's going to get himself a nice recruiting class. But my problem here and the way they judge us, and I was looking at how they judge who gets into this tournament. So I'm going to read this to you guys. You tell me if Notre Dame doesn't fit all these things. So they say they look at beyond strength of the schedule, the committee's 12 core metrics for comparing teams remaining the same. CFP officials say that these measures are the most impactful when separating teams. Relative scoring offenses. The percentage of offensive points scored compared to the opponent's averaging scoring defenses. Relative scoring defenses, percentages of defensive points allowed compared to the opponent's average scoring offense. Relative total offense, percentages of offensive yards gained compared to opponent's average. And relative total defense, percentage of defensive yards allowed compared to opponent's averages. So there you look at these, I guess, statistics and metrics on how they compare these teams and how they believe the committee believes they should make the Final 12. Now, I don't know what all this means. I'm not going to tell you that I do know what it means. I think Fish, as far as I'm concerned, being that he's the economics major, or even Speedy with his analytics, would probably understand how to explain that. What I do know is I look at the eye test. And the eye test tells me that Notre Dame were one of the top 12 teams in the country all season long. Alabama was not. Alabama shouldn't have made it. And I understand the committee. They look at Alabama. This is not Nick Saban's Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, they have a great recruiting class. They're going to have guys that are going to be drafted in the first and second and third round. They've always had that background. They've won how many national championships? 5, 6 national championships with Nick Saban. That's great. This isn't Nick Saban's team, and this is not the same Alabama team we've seen over the years with Nick Saban. But again, the committee looks at Alabama as the same team every single year. For some reason, they look past what they've done all season long. And they did not deserve to make the Final 12. They did not. I don't care what anybody says. They did not even really challenge Georgia in that SEC championship game. And to me, when you look at that and and I know everybody looks at these points in the system of the metrics and everything like that, you're going in your conference championship game and you're measured against the team that's making it, you got to put on a fight. And if you're not going to put on a fight and you don't show up in that game, how could you let them squeak in with 3 losses? They're the only team in this tournament that has 3 losses. The only team. It doesn't make any sense how they're the only team to sneak in. I understand it's Alabama, but it doesn't make any sense. And I know, Speedy, before we started the show, I think yesterday we were talking about it, and you think the sleepers in this Final 12 is Oklahoma and Alabama, and they're facing off against one another. Mm-hmm. Why?
Alabama, I think, still offensively has enough prowess for that kind of thing, and defensively, they're not as good as they were 2 years ago, but I think they were still enough of a defense, even without Saban there, to be strong enough. That being said, they are definitely not the Saban level defense. Oklahoma is interesting because they have their quarterback healthy in Mateer, who was a lot of people's Heisman radars at the beginning of the season. Then he got hurt, and then he kind of struggled on his way back. Oklahoma beat Alabama head-to-head, though. That's why they're the higher seed, obviously, in addition to them only being a 2-loss team. And they have a really dangerous defense with a coach in Brett Venables that won some titles with Clemson as a defensive coordinator, was a huge part. Look at all those great Clemson defenses they had.
Look at all these teams that have made it to the Final 12. I question a lot. Now, Texas A&M deserves to be here. Now, before they lost against Texas, they were one of the higher seeds, and it was expected to be one of the top, if I'm not mistaken, top 3 higher seeds.
They were 3 at the time.
Yeah, and they
were undefeated.
Yep, and then they fall in all the way to number 7, and that's crazy. After losing against Texas, they fell from number 3 to number 7 that quick. And that's the crazy thing on the metrics in comparison to how they declare these guys and where they're seated. And to me, I still don't understand it when I'm looking at these metrics and they're trying to post them up to explain it.
Because it's all BS, Errol.
Yeah, I got it. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Figure it out. You get $4 million as a conference for your team making the college football playoff. $4 million.
Yep.
The ACC could not put their champion in because Duke upset number 17 at the time, Virginia. That put James Madison, who was ranked like 25th or something before they won their conference, so probably 24, 25, they get in by default. So now one less spot is available for a team like Notre Dame. So now you're kind of stuck between those 3 teams for 2 spots. And there's the ACC saying, hey, Notre Dame doesn't have a conference.
Right.
We need that money. Here's our marketing power behind getting that money. Put Miami in. Miami was not expected to make it, Errol. A million things had to go right in the last 2 weeks of the season. I know you're right. I honestly, I felt the same way.
I thought there was, and I agree with you, and I know a lot of things had to go right, and I know where you're going to go with this because a lot of people said that. But I thought unless some catastrophic thing happened in the last week, I thought Miami was going to sneak in. They were going to get Miami because of Beck. Beck is like this. Everybody loves this kid, and they want to see Beck go and try to win a national championship. This is his final year. He's jumped from how many colleges? Right. I mean, he's been in the portal like 3-4 times. I mean, how long has he been in college football? It feels like he's been there for ages. So everybody wants to see this guy try to win a national championship. So I just didn't believe that Miami wasn't going to sneak in. But I was shocked that Alabama snuck in the way they did with 3 losses. I couldn't believe it. I was talking to my friend. My friend came to me and he said, who do you got, Georgia, Alabama? I said, I'm going to go with Alabama because if Alabama loses, there's no way they make this tournament. No way. So I'm going to go with the Crimson Tide.
I just don't get it. Like Notre Dame's losses by 4 points total, 3 points to Miami at the very beginning of the season in August. That game was August 30th.
They almost came back to win, too. They were down big in that game.
Right. They rattled off 10 straight wins after losing by 3 points, 1 point to A&M, who we just said is ranked 7th. So that was their entirety of their losses. Look at the losses from Alabama. They lost to Florida State, a losing team this year. They got smacked just a second ago by Georgia. And look, their best win of the season was against Georgia. So, they got smacked in that rematch. I thought that was enough for everyone to say, you know what? They're clearly not up to that caliber. Let's keep them out of the playoff this year with that third loss. But they kept them over Notre Dame. It's wild. And Notre Dame's AD, is real pissed about it.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can imagine. But think about this for a second. Every single other one of their sports, their varsity sports, basketball included, are in the ACC.
Right.
So now we may see Notre Dame try to pull out of the ACC in all their other sports. There's a lot of people upset about.
They're trying to make a statement, and I don't know if it's one that they can necessarily win because they're trying to do it for their own values. I know Texas used to do that in the past with the Longhorn Network and stuff like that, and stuck to their own guns. Even though they were in the Big 12, they were not trying to schedule anything extra because of that. And again, I guess in that tight of a tiebreaker scenario, they couldn't reward it.
You know what really bothers me about? First of all, Marcus Freeman, who was possibly going to be an NFL coach a couple of years ago, he went to a national championship. He fell short in a national championship. He was, one play away from possibly winning a national championship. And then 2 years later, has a chance to go into a tournament again and make another run and fall short. They're not playing in their ball game. As a matter of fact, today they announced that they declined playing in their bid for their bowl game, which tells me they're so upset they don't even care about the money they're going to get on that bowl game. They'd rather not play. They'd rather not even show up to the game.
You have a chance, Errol, to win a national championship, or you have a chance to win the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which is what they would have been put in against BYU, who lost their matchup as well. They said, we're not interested. We'll have our own Pop-Tarts from the store for a couple of bucks.
It's really about money. When you think about these ball games, it's all about money, and it's all about money for the NCAA to make. And they want to stick it to the NCAA, and they want to say, you know what? We're not going to play in the game. We don't care about the money you're going to give us, the extra money you're going to give us. We're a rich school. Notre Dame is one of the more prestige schools in the country. We don't need it. And they're making a statement. They're telling you, we don't need to play in that ball game. You want to stick it to us, we're going to stick it to you, and it's going to cost you money. And that's the way they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. And again, the committee is not going to advocate for that kind of thing against Notre Dame specifically, just because they're going to have different things. Now, each school has their own boosters. Each school has their own advocacy for their own things, especially with NIL. But at the same time, it's not the logic that has to be used in this kind of instance for the ranking.
And you know what's funny? Because I'm reading what Fish is saying to Tommy, and he says, well, who's going to fill in? There's somebody.
Georgia Tech is already in.
Yeah, somebody will fill in, but it's not Notre Dame, okay? So when you're talking about trying to sell advertisements and sponsors, and you have advertisers and sponsors going to do commercial and commercial settings, those advertisers are not going to want to work with that particular game because it's not Notre Dame. Who cares about Georgia Tech? I mean,
one of the nasty secrets, Errol, of like college football forever was that the bowl games, those like lesser bowl games, cost the schools money.
Yeah.
They don't make any money whatsoever on these bowl games. So the schools don't want to participate in them if they're like a 6-6 team. But apparently if you're 6-6, you qualify for a bowl. So sometimes you go because you want it to be good. You think it's good for your program.
And now they're adding other 5 and 7 teams because of these other teams dropping out. Notre Dame wasn't the only one. There's like 10 other teams.
7.
Yeah.
No, this is really for the NCAA. They're making the money off of it, and they're making something.
Right.
The school, the school is making something, but they're not making anywhere. Yes.
The Big 12 fines you $500,000 if you don't play in the bowl game. And there's 2 teams that decided that, well, actually that's going to save us money. Because that's how big of a loss these bowl games are. It's such an outdated way to do it. It's an exhibition game after the season's over. Why are we doing that? Anyone who's got an NFL stock, either not even for this year, for next year, they're not risking themselves in something like this.
Yeah.
It ends up becoming like you might as well just have like a junior varsity game with all the backups in, whatever.
It becomes a profit loss, I think, mainly with the 5 and 7 and even the 6-6 teams you're referring to are the schools that like that have been there to other like minor bowl games for a while. Maybe not the schools that are getting there for the first time or anything like that, but any of those schools that are in the Power 4 conferences that are lower end are going to not benefit.
I wrote a story about the college football tournament, and it's up on our website, and you can go to our website. It's very, very funny, and I gave you my take, my thought behind the whole debacle of the committee, and I think the committee is they've for years have reached it. It's a bunch of old guys sitting in a round circle and making a decision in 5 minutes. Oh, okay, we're going to go with this team just because it's this team and this coach. Or I was sleeping with this guy 2 years ago, and I'm going to go with this guy. I don't know. I don't know how they're making the decisions because these metrics, and that's why I kept bringing it up, and I wanted to read off the college football and how they're choosing who makes it and who doesn't, by looking at these metrics, and I pretty much gave you my take to it. I don't understand it. How do you post something like this up?
BS,
I know,
man.
that's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, they're changing their logic every year.
That's what I'm saying when I'm posting this stuff up. And I'm trying, I wanted to see how they're judging and they're using the metrics on who makes it and who's not. The reason why I did that is because the truth is, it doesn't make sense. So it is BS. That's what I'm saying. The whole thing is bullshit. That's what it is.
Yeah, and to explain it a little further, Fish, what you were describing at the end of the season was like Miami blew out Pitt at the end of the year. Pitt was an ACC contender for a while. They might have made the ACC Championship game if they won that game instead of, obviously, Duke, who got in instead. It might have been Virginia and Pitt. And then you got Notre Dame, who played well but kind of struggled down the stretch. That was kind of the argument, I guess, to make with Miami over Notre Dame because their strength of schedule was pretty similar and they won head-to-head, which head-to-head, it's interesting they factor that in now because usually it's not as applicable because a lot of the teams fighting for spots don't play with each other. Now, again, it's interesting with the standards that they're holding with the ACC, trying to put somebody else in when obviously there's a different conference championship instead. That being said, JMU, I think, and Tulane, based on the rule, end up deserving it. That leaves, as we've got into it, Alabama. Alabama has been amidst of, I think the college football playoff in the times they've existed have mostly gotten the top 4 teams
They
right.
make it every year.
But most of the controversy of slim pickings outside of the Notre Dame and Texas A&M from 2020 are mostly based on Alabama. Now, I thought Alabama should have gotten in over Ohio State when they did in 2017. That being said, Errol and I mentioned it 2 years ago. Florida State and Georgia both not getting in over Alabama that year.
To me, that's like a smack in the face because everybody knows I'm a Seminoles fan.
Yep.
And that was the year when we speak about the defense. They were the best defenses in the country, Florida State. And everybody says, well, they got their butts whipped by Georgia. And the reason why they got their butts whipped by Georgia, because after they got knocked out and they were the only undefeated team that did make that tournament, what did they do? All their star defensive players sat out because they were going to the combine.
Suffered an injury, never played football again.
No, I know the Jets drafted him.
Unbelievable.
Which is why I was mentioning last week you can't hold Ole Miss to that same kind of thing just because they lost their entire coaching staff.
And you know what's so weird about that, and going back and forth on how they're judging and how they're using these metrics to get these guys or these teams into this tournament. What throws me off about it is, you look at the coach, and again, Nick Saban or even Dabo Swinney. I remember before the season started, Dabo Swinney and Clemson was like the heavy favorites of winning the national championship.
I was wrong about them.
And they didn't even make the tournaments. As a matter of fact, they looked so bad at some points this year that Dabo Swinney should have lost his job. But because it's Dabo Swinney, if Dabo Swinney and the Clemson they only had 3 losses, Clemson makes the tournament too. And that's the problem right now with the committee. They're looking at the star power of the coaches, the star power of the players. That's why I say with Beck, I absolutely believe the Hurricanes were going to make this tournament. Everybody said, things had to fall into place. Alabama, okay? Things had to fall into place for Alabama to make this tournament. And one of the main things is them beating Georgia. They didn't even come close. They got their butts whipped. The game was over in 5 minutes of the game. It was over.
Yeah, at least compete. Like if they lost by 7, even okay, maybe you could have a case to get him in over.
The game was over in 5 minutes.
And that's
5 minutes.
Now, again, you look at a case of they're changing the conference championship rules next year because Alabama's going to play this extra game. There's a chance they get this extra loss. So we've seen teams either get screwed by that or even boosted by the fact that they play in the conference championships or not. Because it's not like basketball where the conference champion automatically gets in no matter what, and it just affects the seeding. In football, you could still end up winning your conference and lose. Like Penn State in 2016, I thought got screwed because they were a Big Ten championship team. They beat Ohio State, who was the number 1 team that year, didn't get in over Washington. And that's why I think they're changing these conference championship rules. So I don't think Alabama, losing by 7 maybe would have missed, but getting blown out.
How about when TCU went to the national championship?
Well, yeah, TCU was undefeated up until
that's not my point. If you look at their schedule and their strength of schedule, there was only 2 teams in the top 15 that they beat. and they went all the way to the national championship, and they got their butts whipped by Georgia. When you watch it, the whole point of bringing this tournament together and 12 teams, 12 of the top teams of the country, the reason why you're doing this is you want to see the best teams play against one another to fight for a national championship. You do not want to see a team that shouldn't be there go out against a team that's so much more of a superior team than you are, and then beat you by 50. That's embarrassing.
Yep. And it's also a bad look when you look at judges of the committee too. Like, I think Alabama's a really good team, but I can also say they're also undeserving at the same time because they have 3 losses and, like Fish was saying, a blowout loss in that championship game, and they lost to a 5-7 Florida State team by double digits.